Hello, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Emery, and this is Hear Her Sports. Actually, it's the first Hear Her Sports Fast Track. Fast Track episodes will be short and show up in your feed between the regular lineup. They will max out at 20 minutes and could be as short as 5. I'm excited to hear what happens in Fast Track and look forward to working in some tighter time constraints. As you will hear in this episode, Fast Track will focus on a topic. For example, today's guest is Julie Pedalino, a bicycle builder, and we primarily stick to bike fit. Julie makes incredible bikes, is doing innovative and beautiful things technically and artistically, and is really exploding in the industry. We could certainly have taped a very full episode, so I'm apologizing right up front for everything we didn't get to. Before we get started, a thank you to our mutual friend Brandon for introducing us. And now, let's get to it. Hi, Julie. I'm so glad that we were introduced. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's so lovely to meet you as well, and I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, and I'm also excited that we have a Cleveland connection, so maybe we'll meet each other one day in person.
Yes, I would love that.
Yeah. Could you start out by introducing yourself and maybe talk about your company a little bit?
Yeah. So my name is Julie Ann Pedalino. My company is called Pedalino Bicycles, and yes, Pedalino is indeed my real name. I get that question a lot. It is my name. I do custom bicycles. I'm based in Kansas, and my passion is ornament, fancy lugs, steel bikes, but I also do for breaking into titanium as well.
Wow. And your bikes are really beautiful. You have a past as an artist, so your bikes are very artistic.
Yeah, I think besides fitting and fulfilling the function that the client wants, as far as what type of bike it is, why not have it be something beautiful that is meaningful to them personally as well? I think we spend a lot of time on our bikes, so it might as well be something that we have somewhat of a relationship with.
Yeah. I also like how you've been able to, be an artist, but make something that's functional and usable. And I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, that was, I've been an artist my whole life and dabbled in all sorts of different mediums. And I never realized until I started making the bikes that what I was missing was that this object that I'm making has to have a function. There has to be a reason for it to be in the world. And bikes are tools. And I think it's just super cool that I can make something that someone can use and also appreciate and enjoy aesthetically.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk specifically today about bike fit. So let's start with just, do you have a theory about bike fit, or what are your thoughts about bike fit?
My thoughts are that it's very important. It's one of the main reasons that I became interested in becoming a custom builder in the first place was I'm a smaller woman. It's hard for me to find a bike off the shelf that fits me. And I just kind of suffered in pain for a long time without really knowing what was possible. So for me, bike fit's one of the fundamentals of what I do as a custom builder.
Why did you think that your pain had to do with bike fit? It could have been all sorts of other things, or you could have just quit and not enjoyed biking.
Yeah, I didn't know at the time that it was because I was riding an ill-fitting bike. Honestly, I thought this is just part of cycling, and you need to suck it up, you need to toughen up, and just, no one else is complaining, so you need to get used to it. So it wasn't until I got on a bike that actually did fit me, and then all those pains went away. I was like, oh, this is a much more pleasant and sustainable experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of pains were you having?
A lot of my issues had to do with my saddle, honestly. That was the one big thing that I changed, and it completely changed how I sit on the bike, how the bike handles, and then, of course, a lot of the pain, obviously a soft tissue pain, but then because I was kind of compensating and protecting delicate areas, other parts of my body hurt as well, like my lower back, my shoulders, and things that I thought were maybe, my bike's too long, really had more to do with the saddle. The bike was too long, but, fixing the saddle was the big deal for me, the big game changer.
That's so interesting because I recently got a custom bike that fit me, and I'm also your same size, 5'4", and my issues always sort of manifested in my upper body, like my arms and shoulders and stuff. Yeah. But in this new bike, I noticed that I totally sit differently on the saddle. And that has cleared up, problems on my right leg and in my, it's super interesting.
Yeah, it's funny how a problem in one place will manifest in a completely different place on your body. So it's not always like a logical, oh, my hip hurts. it's got to do with, knee over pedal spindle or something like that,
Right.
Yeah, bike fit's kind of, it, it can be kind of tricky in that way because it's not an exact science, and sometimes you have to dig and think kind of outside of the box to find out what the problem is. And it could just be, oh, we need to adjust your cleat a tiny bit, or, slightly longer stem, or rotation of the handlebars, or how the hoods are oriented on the bars, that kind of a thing.
Right, right. So how do you do your bike fits?
I work with a fitter here locally. His name is Mike Irwin. He's got years of experience in the field. He used to be a bike shop owner, and he's got the physiological body science background that I don't have. So we collaborate together, and what I do is I have a client come over, they bring the bike that they're riding on currently, and we set that up in a trainer, and we take a look and do some measurements, and then that's our starting point. And then from there, if I'm working on a custom bike, I have a sizing cycle where I can adjust the seat tube angle, the top tube length, head tube angle, the handlebar drop, and all of that. So I can mock up what I think they need on the Fitmaster. But usually, we're not changing that much on their current bike, so we haven't even really been using the Fitmaster as much. It's usually just a few little tweaks, but they can make all the difference.
So who do you think needs a custom, needs, who do you think would benefit from a custom bike? Like, who are your customers, and, where do you see it making the biggest difference?
I wouldn't say that I think everyone could benefit from it, but that's just that's just my perspective as a builder. I think there's certain segments of the population who are underserved by what's out there as far as off-the-shelf bikes, who stand to benefit a lot more than an average size person. So the shorter people or the taller people, they're the ones that stand to get the most. And I think especially the shorter people, I'm a really big proponent of proportional wheel size, and that's certainly something that you can't get walking into a bike store. So I'm talking about 650C or 650B wheels instead of 700C wheels, and maybe custom forks to go along with that. There's just a lot of geometry compromises that happen on the small size range of production bikes that I don't have to do as a custom builder if I use the appropriate wheel size for that frame.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and talk about maybe the difference between 650B and 650C, but also, talk about sort of those compromises that you have to make when you make a bike that's smaller?
Sure. So 650C is smaller than a 700C wheel. 700 is the standard wheel that's see on most bikes. 650C is smaller. 650B is a little bit bigger. Traditionally, 650B has been more of a mountain bike wheel size, but lately they've been coming out with 33, 35 millimeter tires for cyclocross, even slicks that work on 650B wheels, which is opening up a lot of possibilities for me as a builder, especially with, the all-road bikes being popular right now. 650C is more of a standard road bike wheel size. A lot of folks in the triathlon scene use them, but there aren't very many options out there as far as rims and tires, which is, fortunate part. But I think wheels go hand in hand with forks. So for me, there's no sense in speccing a 650C wheel if I'm going to use a standard 700C fork. So I like to suggest a custom fork to go along with that wheel, where I can pick the offset or the rake and really dial in that trail number, which is the number in your geometry that you can look at that will give you an idea of how the bike is going to handle. Typically, for a road bike, people like to target a number of 56, and that's the offset of the wheel against the ground. It would be easier if I could draw a diagram, but
right.
Just trust me that 56 is what we like to go for road bike handling, and that means you're going to get snappier, responsive handling from the handlebars. A bigger number will give you different handling. Like if you can picture a mountain bike on the extreme other end of the spectrum, you've got super slack head tube angles. So that's a really long trail, and it just means that you're going to have to put a lot more input into those handlebars to steer the bike, which is a good thing if you're doing quick little hairpins or, needing to maneuver around obstacles. You don't want your bike to, do an extreme turn for every twitch of the handlebars, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the big benefits, I think, of going to a smaller wheel size. You also get to completely eliminate the problem of toe overlap, which I know you can learn how to ride with it. And a lot of people don't think it's a big deal because they think it's more of a skill type deal. But from personal anecdotal experience, I didn't realize how much toe overlap was a sort of like low-key subconscious worry of mine until I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept again and again being like, oh, I don't have to worry. I'm not scared in this situation. I can relax and I can, really hammer into that corner, or if I'm on the bike path, I don't have to unclip one foot because I'm afraid of a hairpin turn. So for me, not having toe overlap is a big deal. And the final little bonus of the smaller wheels is that we can just get a really short, tight wheelbase, which for a road bike is awesome. And you're gonna see a lot of enhancements in your climbing on the hills. It's just gonna feel like a snappy, responsive, fast little bike, fun, fast little Corvette type bike, which is just a little extra bonus, I think, from the smaller wheels. And then I guess the final thing is that your center of balance is lowered, which again, I think can have an impact on stability while you're riding, and then standover clearance as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things kind of work together. And when you're working with a 700C wheel for the same size rider, then, you're not going to be able to get that nice 56 trail and not have toe overlap at the same time. Seat tube angles get really extreme because it's just a way to compensate for top tube length with the bigger wheels and toe overlap and all of this, So the compromise has to come somewhere because they really just don't work well on a small frame. So yeah, it's usually a real steep seat tube angle and compromises on the trail.
Right. I think what's interesting, and I had not realized this until I started doing more research for my own bike, but all those little adjustments in your seat tube angle and your steer tube angle and everything really make a difference, not just in sort of the very obvious things like no toe overlap, but actually in how the bike feels when you're on it, when you're riding it.
Yeah, for sure. I think weight balance, the balance of your body weight on a bike has a huge impact on steering and how that ride feels. And you really want to be able to get that proper 40-60, like 40% on the back, 60 on the front. And that's an impossible thing to measure. But if you're too much on the front, it's going to feel weird. If you're too much on the back, it's going to feel weird. But if you're perfectly balanced, it's going to feel really nice and very stable, especially in through the corners.
Right. Getting a custom bike is a big deal. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. And for me, anyway, it's sort of this leap of faith. Like, somebody has told me that I'm going to feel better on this bike. So, how do you encourage people, or what do you tell them about what they're going to feel when they get on this new bike?
Yeah, it's hard, especially, if I gave you a drawing with all of these numbers marked out on a frame that I want to build from you, and you compare that to a production bike geometry, you're going to say, these are really little differences. I don't see much of a change, but they all add up to make a big difference. But unfortunately, the only way to find out for yourself is to try it out. If you were in Kansas City and my client, I would let you ride my bike for as long as you want, just to see if you can even tell a difference or what you think about it. It's really hard to make the case without having the person on the bike and riding it, I think. And unfortunately, it is expensive to get a custom bike, and I would love to at some point do a sort of a semi-custom line where a extra small bike with small wheels and everything's all spec'd out is available for people at a lower price point. But I think there are a few brands that do sell small wheel bikes at the low end of the price range, but the brands are escaping me right now.
I talked to a British manufacturer. I'm probably going to...
Hartley?
Yeah, Hartley. And and she developed a off-the-rack set of bikes.
That's fantastic.
And she makes a big point, which I like. She's not making bikes for women. She's making bikes for the size.
Yeah, exactly.
And, so a lot of her customers are really tall or really short, but not necessarily men or women.
Yeah, well, I think stereotypes based on women's bodies are all a big misconception and make no sense in reality. Just based on what I've seen measuring people, there's no women always have long legs and short torsos. Men are always the opposite. It's nonsense. Doesn't really matter what your gender is. Body geometry just varies across the board. So I'm with that too. I don't think that we need to say 650C is a women's size, or, this is a women's specific bike. It's just a bike for a smaller body.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people are pretty satisfied. And it's fun for me too, to take what I've experienced from riding ill-fitting bikes to riding something that's built for me and give that to someone else. It's really wonderful.
I'm going to go back to a question about the wheels. When I was racing, nobody used smaller wheels, and I don't remember anything concrete other than, you don't want to use those smaller wheels, they're slower or whatever. And it seems like sort of popular opinion is changing about using smaller wheels.
Yeah, I hope it is. I've heard the smaller wheels are slower story too, and that's largely a myth. I mean, there might be some, like a very small difference at very high-end speeds. Perhaps. But I think what is more valuable and meaningful is to think of how comfortable you are on a bike. If you're in the most high-tech carbon fiber aero, whatever everyone in the Tour de France is riding, but you're not comfortable on that bike, you're not going to go fast on it. So for me, comfort is the number one indicator of how fast you're going to be able to go.
Right. Do you have any racers that are using your bikes?
No, not yet, but I would love to. I think it's tricky, to deal with sponsorships.
Right.
And I always wonder, the professional riders out there, how they get bikes to fit them, or if they just don't.
Well, before we sign off, do you have anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't get to?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to leave it with, if you're considering a bike fit, definitely go for it. It's well worth the money, even if they confirm that, yeah, you've got everything set up. You put in the hours, your body, and this is good to go. But they may also come with some suggestions or things that you hadn't even thought of. I know a lot of people debate on whether it's worth it to spend that couple $100s, and I say definitely yes.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah, it was really surprising what I learned at the bike fit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, thank you. This is terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.
Well, thanks for listening, and a big thank you to Julie Pedalino of Pedalino Bicycles. She's been doing some really great stuff prepping for the Philadelphia Bike Expo. Take a look at those images on Instagram at Pedalino Bikes. I'd love to hear what you think about Fast Track. You can call the new Hear Her Sports hotline at 725-BE-BADASS. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to get all the new Fast Tracks right when they come out. And tell your friends. Design is by Agnes Studio and music by the band Gold Mines. Till next time, bye-bye.
Honestly, I work in a little bat cave by myself most of the time.
Have you ever wanted to know how to win a Formula One Grand Prix? I mean, really know. Know about the driver tactics from the cockpit, the strategy calls from the pit wall, and even the mind games in the paddock. There's a lot more that goes into winning a Grand Prix than just 90 minutes of racing. So every week on the F1 Strategy Report, we're taking a deep dive into the decisions that shape every result. Hey there, my name is Michael Laminato, and every week I'm joined by an expert guest from the paddock to talk through the big calls that won the race and the missteps that resulted in bitter defeat. Before every race, we'll look back at the previous year's result and consult the current form guide, and we'll be in your feed after every Grand Prix dissecting the outcome and what it means for the championship. So for your regular hit of Formula One analysis, subscribe to the F1 Strategy Report wherever you get your favourite podcasts. The Strategy Report is a Beer Mogul podcast on the Evergreen Podcasts network. My name's Michael Laminato, and I'll catch you after the checkered flag.